In this conversation between Tom Bilyeu and his guest Rudyard Lynch, they delve into the profound cultural, economic, and social decay facing Western civilization today. Rudyard Lynch, a young yet remarkably well-read historian and thinker, brings a depth of knowledge spanning history, anthropology, neurobiology, and political theory to analyze how Marxism and the rapid changes of modernity have combined to erode foundational cultural structures. The discussion explores how this unraveling sets the stage for social upheaval and revolution, drawing on historical examples, philosophical concepts, and current events. Lynch opens by referencing the 19th century thinker Nietzsche's concept of the age of the last men, which Nietzsche predicted would characterize the 21st century. According to Lynch's interpretation, this age is marked by societal complacency, envy, conformity, and a lack of ambition. These traits, viewed historically as moral virtues, become immoral in this context because they represent a failure to act, a stagnation that ultimately threatens the survival of Western culture. This profoundly sick culture is no longer reproducing itself effectively and losing the cultural coherence that historically enabled societies to thrive over millennia. Lynch emphasizes that modern Western society has discarded not only generational traditions, but also critical inheritance in the form of religion, social structure, national identity, and shared codes of honor. Unlike pre-industrial societies that passed these intangible but essential cultural elements down through generations, today's culture is fragmented, shallow, and lacks a coherent myth or story to unite its people. This loss of shared identity partly accounts for the current sense of societal disintegration. Tom and Lynch discuss how the absence of a shared narrative about America's founding and purpose is emblematic of this cultural dissolution. Competing stories coexist. Some see America as a beacon of prosperity and freedom, others as an oppressive colonialist state, without a unifying frame. This ideological fragmentation deepens polarization and undermines social cohesion. Lynch brings forth the importance of Jordan Peterson's maps of meaning, citing it as a key framework to understand how humans need coherent cultural narratives, or maps, to make sense of the world and direct their actions. Without these maps, societies descend into chaos. Marxism, Lynch argues, intentionally dismantled the unifying culture, exploiting the rapid changes wrought by the Industrial Revolution to accelerate cultural decay. Key Marxist thinkers had explicit strategies for societal destabilization, seeking to dissolve religion and traditional bonds to erode trust, create social disorientation, and promote chaos. Unlike previous eras that could absorb cultural shocks, the accelerated rate of change in industrial modernity left societies vulnerable to this engineered fragmentation. Turning to economics, Lynch and Bilyeu share a foundational consensus. The current crises in society ultimately stem from economic distortions. The abandonment of the gold standard in 1913 and the establishment of the Federal Reserve ushered in a fiat currency system with near limitless printing of money, resulting in inflation that effectively steals from savers and exacerbates wealth inequality. The real estate market highlights this inequality, where a small fraction of the population owns an overwhelming majority of assets. This economic disparity creates conditions akin to historical moments preceding revolution, comparable to pre-French Revolution levels of inequality. Lynch stresses that without fixing this primary economic breach, social unrest and cultural breakdown will only worsen. The fracturing of middle-class stability means that society can no longer rely on economic prosperity to paper over cultural rifts, which now become more visible and dangerous. As the conversation deepens, Lynch explains the ideological and practical failures of Marxism and its enduring cultural influence. Marxists see history and society in reductionist terms, a fixed pie to be divided, assuming uniformity among all people, a linear historical direction, and the capability of state-driven social engineering. These assumptions ignore the complexities of living cultures, the importance of productivity, and human nature's nuance. As a result, Marxist attempts at remaking society have repeatedly failed catastrophically, as evidenced by Stalinist purges and Maoist disasters that decimated intellectual, agricultural, and military leadership, devastating those societies' fabric. Lynch highlights that Marxism's goal of destroying culture is warping not just the left but also the right, as the intricate webs of modern political thought are impossible to disentangle from its legacy. It's driven by envy, a desire for power and control, further amplified by ideological contradictions that leave its followers trapped in cycles of purity tests and factional purges. The podcast explores the left's current state, which Lynch describes not simply as a political failure, but as a pathological cultural ethos marked by inauthenticity and extremism. There is a generational rift between the boomers and Gen Z progressives on the left, with younger cohorts radicalizing away from established institutions. The absence of self-regulation mechanisms common to older political and religious traditions means that ideological extremism escalates unchecked, breeding purges based on vague notions of purity that are often contradictory. The left's portrayal of empathy and compassion frequently veils a form of suicidal empathy, where misguided moralism leads to authoritarian impulses and policies such as unchecked immigration or radical political agendas that destabilize society further. Lynch's critique also touches on how the left suppresses masculine virtues and authentic expression, which disrupts social order and cohesion. One of the most provocative and nuanced themes Lynch discusses is the feminization of Western culture, which he connects to communist thought's emergence in historical frameworks that link feminized societies to communism and the breakdown of the family. This phenomenon arises partly from evolutionary and biological imperatives, where women, burdened with child-rearing responsibilities, have evolved social strategies prioritizing risk mitigation and conformity over hierarchical ambition. This scenario fosters widespread social distrust, decreased birth rates, and hypergamy, where a small cohort of high-status men attracts most women, leaving many men disenfranchised. The inability of many men to compete effectively leads to frustration, social isolation, and further cultural instability. Lynch laments that Western society increasingly discourages traditionally masculine virtues such as ambition, dominance, and leadership, which are vital for maintaining social structures and innovation, unlike countries such as China that still aggressively promote these traits. Looking forward, Lynch and Bilyeu assess the cumulative threats posed by the erosion of culture and the accelerating pace of technological change, particularly AI and genetic engineering. These developments require a resurgence of masculinity to harness and control the immense power they confer. Yet modern Western culture appears ill-prepared to meet this challenge due to its internal decay. China's rise is a complex case. Though it projects strength and technological progress, Lynch warns of deep social issues within China. High youth unemployment, social unrest, and totalitarian control that mirror many of the pathologies seen in the West. Both societies are precarious, and without renewed cultural and economic stability, global crises may ensue. Toward the end, Lynch advocates for restoring economic sanity alongside a revival of balanced cultural norms rooted in traditional masculinity and femininity as a path forward. Masculinity, defined by respect and structure, provides the framework iron through which feminine water flows. Without this frame, social institutions collapse. He cautions that simply reinstating religious or moral codes without reinforcing the masculine principle of enforcement and respect will fail. True cultural regeneration demands rebuilding respect for men's roles in constructing social frameworks, allowing women's natural tendencies to flourish within stable systems. Lynch also highlights the toxic social phenomena of mate suppression, where social mechanisms inhibit men's success and fertility, further exacerbating demographic collapse. Rudyard Lynch paints a sobering picture of Western civilization on the brink of crisis, driven by intertwined economic failures and cultural erosion, accelerated by Marxist ideology and modernity's destabilizing effects. The loss of shared mythologies, identity, and traditional norms, coupled with extreme wealth inequality and a crisis of masculinity, fuels polarization, social distrust, and demographic decline. While the prognosis is serious, Lynch hints at hope in recognizing these dynamics and deliberately working toward economic fairness and a balanced reemergence of masculine and feminine roles. However, without significant structural change, he warns that revolution or systemic breakdown appears inevitable in the not-so-distant future.